Hi, I'm Nicola Spurling. Welcome back to my channel. If you don't already know, I am transgender, and today's topic was provided by one of you. I'm going to be talking about the differences before and after transition. There were a lot of experiences that I had in the process of transitioning, but I want to focus on what life was like before and what life was like after. And I should also be clear that I'm talking about after socially transitioning, because transitioning is a process that doesn't really have a clear end date. I would say the first change that I noticed between when I was presenting male and now was when I started on estrogen, and taking the medication ended up creating this sense of clarity. It was like one of those Claritin Clear ads where this film is sort of peeled away and you can finally see the world clearly. I would say a lot of that has to do with the fact that I was dealing with some depression. So it was getting rid of that depression, but there was also just this other kind of feeling because I'd come out of depression in the past. It wasn't quite the same. I just had this whole understanding of life that was different than before, a whole clarity around everything that I wanted to do, everything I was capable of, and it almost seemed like I was starting my life over. Obviously, I had already built up a lot of my interests and some of the work that I was doing, but it just seemed like anything was possible. And I could be anyone I wanted to be, I could do anything I wanted to do, and I think coming out as trans was such a scary process, such a daunting thing to do, that every other life change just seemed sort of easy by comparison. Not to say that life is completely easy now, but everything just seems a lot more manageable now that I've been through that experience. I think another big one is just that I was able to explore anything I wanted to explore. I didn't have those gendered restrictions anymore. I didn't have people saying, well, you're sitting like a girl, you're talking like a girl, you're walking like a girl. Those were all deemed insults back when I was presenting male, and I didn't necessarily always take them as insults, but they were certainly intended that way. They were intended to try to check my behavior, to police the way that I was acting, and that's something that I don't have to do anymore. Even if that means doing something that's stereotypically masculine while I'm presenting in a feminine way, obviously people view that as strange now. But I've been there, I've done that, and it's not something I worry about anymore, and so that was a big eye-opening experience and quite a freeing experience as well. Part of what I had to do was unlearn some of those behaviors that I mentioned before. So sitting a certain way, walking a certain way, acting a certain way, being interested in certain things. If it was something that I was doing because I was trying to present an image to the world that wasn't really me, and it was me trying to act in a more masculine way, I had to then unlearn that behavior. And that was behavior that I had learned as a coping mechanism, as a way of hiding my true identity from the world because it was something that I felt shame around. Those were things that I had to unlearn the shame of and unlearn how to do in order to get back to that me that is authentic, that I knew as a child, that understood my gender identity before I even knew what the words gender identity meant or what it meant to be trans. I would say there was a certain amount of stress shortly after coming out as trans, and that had to do with being out in public and presenting myself to the world and not knowing how people were going to react, or maybe assuming the worst in people. So when I would be walking down the street, people might give me funny looks. I don't know if that was in my head or if people were actually giving me funny looks, but it seemed like it was happening all the time. And I know that at the time, my gender presentation was fairly androgynous. So it's very possible that people were looking at me and trying to figure out whether I'm a boy or a girl. It's something a lot of trans people get asked. And that throughout my transition went away. And I don't know if I'm still getting those looks, but I'm just ignoring them, or if the looks subsided because my physical transition was continuing to move along. That remains to be determined. I do know that I'm perceived as a woman much more often, so it's entirely possible that that has helped with some of those looks that I was getting or thinking I was getting in public. When you're walking around in public and people are giving you a lot of looks, it's really hard to stay confident. So I approached my transition very slowly. I wanted to take all these small steps towards transitioning, and that would be, changing the pants that I wear, then changing the top that I'm wearing, then changing my haircut, all sorts of different aspects of my life until I had achieved the transition that I was looking for. That meant that I was able to maintain a certain degree of confidence throughout everything, but with every change, your confidence suffers a little bit and you have to build it back up again. So once my transition was sort of to the stage where I didn't have to make changes that affected my confidence as much, the confidence that I have just continues to grow and grow and grow, and it's something that I'm trying to nurture. I've never had a lot of confidence in my life. I've portrayed myself as a confident person, but in my mind it's always been an act. It's been thinking how people expect me to behave and then trying to behave that way and trying to act in a confident manner. But I really truly now feel that I am really confident. And I don't mean really in terms of I have a ton of confidence, but that it's genuine confidence. And that's an important piece, and I'm just continuing to work on that because I think that it's important to be confident in everything that you're doing. It's important to be confident in the quirks that you have. I used to always say thank you when people would call me weird because I didn't want it to have a negative connotation to it. I thought weird just means unique. That's a good thing. But I never really had confidence in owning that word weird, whereas now I do, because I understand that I can have all these quirks about me and that makes me me, and they're quirks that I can be proud of. I have definitely noticed changes in how people perceive me. I am perceived as a woman in most instances now, like I mentioned. And with that means people want to do things for you. They want to hold the door open for you. They want to carry heavy objects for you, open doors for you. And that's very nice. It's affirming, but at the same time I'm thinking I can do that myself. Nothing's changed since I was perceived as a man. I'm still just as capable as I was before, but people don't seem to think I'm as capable. They seem to think that I'm weaker. They seem to think that I'm less intelligent. And none of that is the case. If anything, I'm more intelligent. If anything, I'm working out more now than I did when I was presenting male because I really want to work on myself. I want to better myself. So all of that is completely untrue, and it's something that I want people to realize. And it's not just about trans people. It's that women are just as capable as men. It's a feminist issue. So I view myself not just as a trans advocate, but also as a feminist, because I do truly believe that men and women deserve equal opportunities. And through transition, I see how that's not always the case, and how it's very easy for men to overlook that because they don't understand what it is that women are going through when they're being marginalized by society. A really big positive for me is that I'm much calmer now. I was never someone that would fly off the handle for no reason, but I certainly was someone who dealt with a lot of mood swings. In the peak of my depression, I really only had two emotions, and it was to feel absolutely nothing or to be angry. So I spent a lot of the time being angry just because it allowed me to feel something. And that's something that has gone away since transitioning for the most part. I very rarely get angry to the point of having that anger take a hold of me. I seem to always have some control over my anger. I don't get angry as frequently, and I feel that I'm just much calmer, much happier, and that's been a huge positive for me since transitioning. And it seems like that continues to happen as I realize that there's no limits to what I can work on in my life. I am achieving much more peace in myself. I'm really working on self-care, self-improvement, and that's been extremely helpful for me. It's not a direct result of the transition, but the transition was sort of the kick in the butt that I needed in order to focus on these types of things. So transitioning has a number of side effects that you don't necessarily expect. Obviously, you expect it to have some physical changes on your body. You expect to develop breasts, more fat around your hips, things like that, some sort of facial feminization. But you don't necessarily expect some of the changes in appetite or drinks that you can stomach. And so a big one for me is that I used to be able to go out on a Friday night and have lots of beers and be totally fine. I'd wake up without a hangover the next morning. Now I have one single beer and I already feel like I have a hangover. So I wasn't a massive drinker before I transitioned, but I definitely don't drink very much anymore, and it's just due to the fact that beer in particular, which was sort of my beverage that I would go to if I was going over to a friend's house or something like that, doesn't sit well with me anymore. So I don't drink very often. I also noticed in terms of perception that people don't know how I'm going to react to them bringing up the topic of gender identity. When people want to ask me about my gender identity, they want to ask me my pronouns, they want to talk about my transition, I'm very open about that, and I think I do a good job of making that clear, but people still always apologize when they're asking me questions. They really sort of tiptoe around the issue, and I think it's good that people want to be respectful, but it's also a little bit irksome at times when people seem like they're afraid of talking about a topic with me, and I want to figure out how I can better educate people so that they don't feel that fear of having a conversation about what it means to be trans. Not every trans person is going to want to have that conversation, but if you're approaching someone that has these conversations on a regular basis and you want to ask questions that are going to better yourself, that are going to make you a more accepting person, a more understanding person, I think it makes sense that you should be able to ask those questions freely, and I just want people to be able to have that conversation. And obviously that doesn't mean that you can make super offensive remarks, but it's important that you're able to ask questions and able to learn. Otherwise, we're not really getting to a point of achieving acceptance and understanding and respect. One of the negatives, and it's probably the biggest negative, not that I can't even really think of other things that are particularly negative other than the way that I'm perceived by people, but the way that I perceive myself, the biggest negative I have is body image issues. And that's something that I'm going to have to work on now, just like any cis woman's going to have to work on. And the reason for that is that we have societal expectations placed on women, and that means that I'm supposed to look a certain way, my body is supposed to look a certain way. This is what the media is telling me, this is what society is telling me, this is what everyone around me seems to be striving for, and you see very few examples of people that just own their bodies and say, this is who I am, you know, I'm not ashamed of who I am, I'm not going to hide who I am, and I'm not at that point yet. I'm still working on my body image issues. I am really trying to address them. I'm trying to get to the point where I can be confident in every aspect of myself. And the biggest thing, or one of the biggest things that I need to work on, is being confident in my body. When I went through all of these physical changes, I went from thinking I'm a very slender, fairly attractive man. I mean, there wasn't a lot that I had to do to look at myself in the mirror and say I like what I see. I think maybe I thought I should be more muscular in order to look more masculine, but I was fairly fit, and so that wasn't the biggest of concerns for me. As a woman, I find it much more difficult to control my weight. There's fat deposits in different areas that I didn't have when I was presenting masculine, and that affects my confidence because I still view my body in the eyes of someone who grew up thinking that you're supposed to have wide shoulders, narrow hips. Now I've got wider hips, things that in the past I've told myself were wrong. And then if I accept myself as the woman that I am, I also look at myself in the sense of I don't live up to these expectations that I see before me of what women are supposed to look like. That's in part due to some level of gender dysphoria and thinking that my body is still masculine. They're not. I'm a woman through and through, and every aspect of me is a woman's body part. But I still see myself through those eyes from before. I still see the way that I look before in my current form. I see those aspects of me that haven't changed because they don't need to change. They don't look masculine. But I see components of myself as undesirable. And I'm trying to change that because it shouldn't matter what my body looks like. And I should have the same worth to the world no matter what I look like. So I've been putting out challenges to myself. I've been pushing myself to go swimming in the summers, and I hadn't swum in probably 8 years because I was too afraid of being in front of people in a swimsuit. This past summer, I've managed to get out a number of times, and the more I do it, the more confidence I have in myself. I recently posted a picture of myself in underwear where I wrote every negative thing I thought about myself on my body in the locations that bothered me, to get it out to the world and to let them know that I have these insecurities, and to get feedback from people saying you don't need to have those insecurities, which made me feel better, but also to let other people know that they're not alone in feeling those insecurities, because I know I'm not the only one. So to end on a more positive note, overall, transitioning has been the absolute best thing that I've ever done in my life in terms of making sure my mental health is in a good place, making sure that I can look at myself in a mirror and be happy with who I see. Body image issues aside, I'm much happier in the person that I see in the mirror because it reflects who I am instead of an image of a person I think I'm supposed to be. So with all of the body image issues that I have, it's still an improvement to look at myself in the mirror and see the person I'm meant to be, my authentic self looking back at me. And also the way that I interact with the world. People now view me the way that I view myself. I'm not hiding anything from anyone. I'm able to experience all of the things that I want to experience without fear of judgment. And that's been a huge improvement in my life. And it's something that I continue to build on. No matter how old we are, we always have things in our life that we can improve on and that we can do to make ourselves better. It's not about competing with other people. I'm better than you, you're better than me. It's just about saying, I'm a better me than I was a week ago, a month ago, a year ago, and making sure that I continue on that path, that I'm not moving backwards, that I continue to improve myself, the way that I feel about myself, my abilities, all of that. And I hope that in sharing this with you, you have a better understanding of what it means to be trans. If you're going through a transition yourself, you maybe have a sense of what you can look forward to or what challenges you might face. Transitioning is not all sunshine and rainbows. It's a difficult process, but it can be a hugely rewarding process, and I am much better for it at the end of the day. So if you've enjoyed watching this video, please hit that like button. If you want to see more content like this, please hit that subscribe button. If you want to hear about upcoming videos that I post, make sure you hit that bell. And if you have ideas for future videos, you have questions for me, comments, please leave them down below. And until next time, have a great day.